What happens when one of the most talked about figures in the world sits down for what should be a straightforward interview, but instead unleashes a verbal assault so shocking that it ends with her being escorted off the set? In just 39 seconds, a single comment would ignite a firestorm that turned a routine conversation into television chaos. Bill Maher settled into his chair that evening with his usual confident demeanor, ready for another episode of real talk and unfiltered opinions. His guest was someone who had dominated headlines for years, someone whose every move seemed to generate endless controversy and debate. Meghan sat across from him, poised and polished, but there was a tension in the air from the very beginning. "So, let's just dive right in," Bill began, leaning forward with that characteristic directness his audience had come to expect. "You've been in the public eye for a long time now. You've made a lot of claims about how you've been treated. But I think a lot of people are wondering, at what point does personal responsibility come into play?" The question hung in the air for a moment. Meghan's expression shifted, her smile tightening at the edges. "Personal responsibility?" she repeated, her voice taking on a sharp edge. "I think that's rich coming from someone who has built an entire career on saying whatever he wants without consequences." Bill raised his eyebrows, clearly not expecting such an immediate confrontation. "Well, that's what we do here. We have conversations, sometimes uncomfortable ones. But that's the point, isn't it? To actually talk about things honestly." Honestly? Meghan leaned forward now, her tone growing more combative. "Let's talk honestly then. You sit here week after week, judging everyone, acting like you're above it all. But you're just another person with a platform who thinks their opinion matters more than everyone else's." The audience had gone quiet. This wasn't the playful back and forth that sometimes happened on the show. This was something else entirely. Bill kept his composure, but there was a flicker of surprise in his eyes. "I never said my opinion matters more than anyone else's," he replied evenly. "But I do think that when you put yourself out there the way you have, when you do interviews and make public statements, people are going to have questions. That's fair, isn't it?" Meghan laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Fair? You want to talk about fair? Nothing about the way I've been treated has been fair. Nothing about the way the media has twisted every single thing I've said or done has been fair. And now you're going to sit here and lecture me about fairness?" Bill took a breath, clearly trying to keep the conversation on track. "I'm not lecturing you. I'm asking you questions. That's literally what we do on this show. You agreed to come on here knowing that." "I agreed to come on here thinking I might actually get to have a real conversation," Meghan shot back. "Not to be attacked the moment I sit down." "Attacked?" Bill's voice rose slightly, his patience clearly being tested. "Asking you about personal responsibility is not an attack. It's a question, one that a lot of people have." "Of course they do," Meghan said, but her voice dripping with sarcasm. "Because people love to tear down a woman who speaks her mind. People love to find ways to blame the victim instead of looking at the actual systems that create these problems in the first place." Bill shook his head. "See, this is what I'm talking about. Every time someone asks you a difficult question, you pivot to being a victim. You make it about everyone else being against you instead of actually engaging with the substance of what's being asked." The tension in the studio had become palpable. Crew members exchanged glances. The audience sat frozen, unsure whether they should react or stay silent. This had escalated far beyond a typical heated debate. Meghan's face had flushed red. "You have absolutely no idea what it's like to be in my position. None. You get to sit here in your comfortable chair, or in your safe little bubble, and judge people who have actually lived through things you couldn't begin to understand." "I'm not claiming to understand your specific experience," Bill said, his voice firm but controlled. "But I am saying that being in a difficult situation doesn't exempt you from criticism. It doesn't mean that every choice you've made has been the right one, or that people aren't allowed to question those choices." "Question?" Meghan's voice had risen now. and she was no longer making any attempt to hide her anger. Is that what you call this? Because it feels a lot more like an interrogation. It feels a lot more like you brought me here just to humiliate me in front of your audience. Bill spread his hands in a gesture of confusion. Meghan, you're doing this to yourself right now. I asked you a straightforward question, and you've turned this into something it didn't need to be. No, Meghan said, pointing a finger at him. You set this up from the beginning. You knew exactly what you were doing. You wanted to make me look bad, and you're succeeding because you control the narrative here. You control how this gets edited, how it gets presented, everything. That's not true, Bill said, his voice hardening. We don't edit these conversations to make people look bad. What you're doing right now, how you're reacting, that's all you. That's your choice. Meghan stood up abruptly, and the sudden movement caused several audience members to gasp. My choice. You want to talk about my choices? Fine. Here's a choice. I choose not to sit here and be disrespected by someone who clearly had an agenda from the moment I walked in. Bill remained seated, looking up at her with a mixture of disbelief and frustration. Sit down, Meghan. Let's finish this conversation like adults. Adults? Meghan's laugh was bitter and harsh. Adults don't ambush their guests. Adults don't pretend to have a genuine conversation when they're really just looking for sound bites and controversy. This is unbelievable, Bill muttered, shaking his head. You came on my show. Nobody forced you to be here. And now you're throwing a tantrum because I asked you a question you didn't like. A tantrum? Meghan's voice had reached a near shout now. How dare you? This is exactly what I'm talking about. A man can get angry and he's passionate. A woman gets angry and she's having a tantrum. The double standard is incredible, and you're proving my point right now. Bill stood up now too, clearly done trying to salvage the interview. No, Meghan, you don't get to hide behind gender when you're behaving badly. Man or woman, if you act like this, people are going to call it out. That's not a double standard. That's just standards. Behaving badly? Meghan's voice was shaking with rage now. You are unbelievable. You know what? I'm done. I'm not doing this anymore. I don't have to stand here and take this abuse from you or anyone else. Abuse? Bill's voice was incredulous. Are you actually serious right now? I asked you questions. That's it. That's literally all I did. And somehow, in your mind, that's abuse. Meghan was already moving toward the edge of the stage. This interview is over. I'm leaving. Bill called after her, his voice firm. You can't just walk off in the middle of a live show, Meghan. Hi, that's not how this works. She spun around, her eyes blazing. Watch me. I don't owe you anything. I don't owe this audience anything. And I certainly don't owe you the satisfaction of continuing this charade. A producer had appeared at the side of the stage, trying to figure out how to handle the situation. The audience was now murmuring, completely absorbed in the drama unfolding before them. This is exactly what's wrong with you, Meghan continued, her voice carrying across the studio. You think everyone owes you something. You think everyone should just sit there and take whatever you dish out, because you're Bill Maher, and this is your show. Well, guess what? Some of us have self-respect. Some of us know when we're being disrespected and have the courage to walk away. Bill's jaw was tight, his composure finally starting to crack. You want to talk about self-respect? Then show some. Honor the commitment you made when you agreed to come on this show. Sit down and finish the conversation instead of running away the moment things get uncomfortable. Uncomfortable? Meghan laughed again, that same harsh, humorless sound. This isn't uncomfortable. This is hostile. There's a difference, and if you can't see that, then you're even more out of touch than I thought. I'm out of touch? Bill's voice rose. You live in a mansion. You've made millions of dollars telling your story over and over again. You've had every platform imaginable handed to you, and you have the audacity to stand here and call me out of touch? Yes, Meghan shouted. Because money doesn't protect you from racism. Money doesn't protect you from sexism. Money doesn't protect you from being treated like you're less than human by people who think they know everything about you based on tabloid headlines. Bill threw up his hands, and there it is. Every single time. Every conversation somehow comes back to this. You can't just have a normal discussion about anything because you've built your entire identity around being a victim. The words hung in the air like a grenade. The audience gasped collectively. Meghan's face went pale, then flushed deep red. "How dare you," she said, her voice dangerously quiet now. "How dare you minimize everything I've been through? You have no right. No right at all." "I have every right to have an opinion," Bill said, standing his ground. "Just like you have the right to yours. But the difference is, I'm not claiming that everyone who disagrees with me is attacking me. I'm not playing the victim card every time someone challenges what I say." Meghan took a step toward him, and for a moment, the entire studio seemed to hold its breath. "You are a small, petty man who gets his kicks from tearing people down. That's all this is. That's all you are." Bill's eyes narrowed. "And you are someone who can't handle the slightest bit of criticism without falling apart. That's why this interview is going the way it is. Not because of anything I did, but because you can't handle being questioned." "I don't have to handle anything from you," Meghan said, her voice shaking. She turned to the producer, who was still hovering nearby, looking completely lost. "Get me out of here. Now." The producer looked at Bill, then back at Meghan, clearly unsure what to do. Bill made the decision for everyone. "Security," he called out, his voice carrying authority. "Please escort our guest out of the studio." The audience erupted in shocked whispers. Meghan's eyes went wide with disbelief. "You're having me thrown out?" she said, her voice a mixture of shock and rage. "Are you kidding me right now?" "You said you wanted to leave," Bill said coldly. "So leave. But you don't get to storm around my stage throwing accusations and insults and then act surprised when there are consequences." 2 security guards had appeared, looking extremely uncomfortable with the situation they were being put in. They approached Meghan carefully. "Don't you touch me," she snapped at them, then looked back at Bill. "This is going to be everywhere. Everyone is going to see what kind of person you really are, how you treat people, how you abuse your power." "Good," Bill said, his voice steady. "Let them see it. Let them see all of it. The whole conversation. Every word. Then people can decide for themselves who was reasonable here and who wasn't." Meghan opened her mouth to say something else, but one of the security guards gently touched her elbow, guiding her toward the exit. She jerked her arm away, but started walking, her heels clicking sharply against the floor. As she reached the edge of the stage, she turned back one more time. "You're going to regret this," she said, her voice carrying across the silent studio. Bill just looked at her, his expression unreadable. "I doubt it." And with that, Meghan disappeared backstage, the security guards following close behind. The studio remained in stunned silence for several long seconds. Bill stood there, taking a deep breath, clearly trying to collect himself. Finally, he looked at the camera. "Well," he said, and there was a slight tremor in his voice, despite his attempt at composure. "That just happened." The audience didn't know how to react. A few nervous laughs broke out, but mostly people just sat there, processing what they had witnessed. Bill walked back to his chair and sat down slowly. He ran a hand through his hair and looked directly at the camera. "You know, I've been doing this a long time. I've had a lot of guests. I've had heated conversations. I've had people disagree with me. That's fine. That's part of the job. But what you just saw there is something else entirely." He paused, gathering his thoughts. "I asked a fair question. One question, about personal responsibility, and what followed was a complete meltdown. Now, I want to be clear about something. Everyone is entitled to their feelings. Everyone has the right to get upset. But when you agree to come on a show like this, when you agree to have a public conversation, you have a responsibility to actually engage with that conversation. You don't get to just blow up and storm off because you don't like a question. The audience was listening intently now, hanging on every word. Bill's voice was calm but firm, the voice of someone who knew they had done nothing wrong. "I didn't attack her," he continued. "I didn't insult her. I asked a question that millions of people have been asking. And instead of answering it, instead of having a real discussion, she chose to make this about me. She chose to claim victimhood rather than engage with the substance of what was being asked." He leaned back in his chair, looking tired but resolute. And you know what? That tells you everything you need to know. When someone can't handle a simple question, when they immediately jump to accusations and insults, when they try to shut down conversation rather than participate in it, that says a lot about where they're coming from. The studio was completely quiet except for Bill's voice. "I've been called a lot of things over the years. I've been criticized, attacked, protested against. That's fine. That comes with the territory. But I've never, in all my years of doing this, had someone come on this show and behave the way you just witnessed. I've never had someone so completely unable to handle a basic interview that they had to be escorted out by security." He looked at the audience, his expression serious. "And here's the thing. This isn't about her specifically. This is about a larger issue. It's about the idea that some people think they should be immune from questions, that they should be able to say whatever they want, do whatever they want, and never have to answer for it. That any criticism, any questioning, is automatically an attack." Bill shook his head slowly. "That's not how the real world works. That's not how conversation works. That's not how democracy works. If you can't handle being questioned, if you can't handle defending your positions and your choices, and then maybe you shouldn't be putting yourself out there in public the way some people do." The audience began to applaud, slowly at first, then building. Bill held up a hand to quiet them down. "Look, I don't take any pleasure in what just happened. I really don't. I wanted to have a good conversation. I wanted to give her the opportunity to share her perspective, to explain her side of things. But she made that impossible. And that's on her. Not on me. Not on this show. That's on her." He glanced toward the spot where Meghan had been sitting, now empty. "I hope she finds peace. I really do. I hope she gets to a place where she can handle disagreement without falling apart, where she can engage with people who see things differently without treating it as a personal attack. Because until that happens, these situations are going to keep repeating themselves." Bill turned back to the camera one more time. "We're going to take a break. When we come back, we'll continue with the rest of tonight's show. Because that's what professionals do. They keep going. They don't storm off when things get difficult. They show up and they do their job." As the show cut to commercial, Bill remained in his chair, the weight of what had just transpired settling over the studio. The audience sat in their seats, still processing the explosive confrontation they had witnessed. Nobody had expected the evening to unfold this way. Nobody had anticipated such a dramatic implosion over such a simple question. But that's exactly what had happened, and everyone there knew they had witnessed something that would be talked about for a long time to come.